I'm the Scale Model Geek, and in this video I built this awesome looking Gundam GOK. Now I've had this thing in my stash for about 25 years now, so it's been a while. I'm finally getting around to it, and you can see originally I paid $8.95 for it. These days, they're selling for about 20 bucks, so pretty much triple the price. So let's get straight into it and build this thing, shall we? Or not? Okay, I guess I better explain to you what the situation is here. So I originally recorded the assembly of it, but unfortunately the first 24 files on my video card were actually corrupt. They had 0 bytes in them, so I kind of lost all that footage. Luckily, the stuff that I've lost were basically just the usual normal, easy stuff that you do when you start building a kit. Snipping off the sprue, bit of gluing, bit of sanding, bit of filing, make sure all the bits and pieces fit together. So let's do a bit of a skip in time and head over to the build. What I'm doing here is grinding out the back of the plastic, and I'm doing this to thin it out so when I punch through it, it looks like it's been damaged quite severely and it has jagged edges and that type of thing. That little white box you see there on the side is an area that I've already punched out, and I built it so I can put some greeblies in it. Now, sadly, in the lost footage, that's where it shows, but it will pop up a little bit later, so don't run away, don't panic, you will see it. I'm just filing all the joints so they're nice and flat. Now we'll be adding some detail to the bottom of his feet, simply because you will see them in the diorama. And this is his clawy handy thingy. The great thing is they give you a whole bunch of extra claws so you can pose them to the way you want. Give you a whole bunch of other options. And for this section I used a bit of super glue, so I couldn't be bothered waiting for them to dry or anything like that. This little bit was a bit fiddly to get it all right, but I finally got there. Now I'm just marking out his feet because I'm going to use this plastic card to add detail to the bottom of his feet. What I like about using this plastic is all you have to do is score it, then it snaps. I made sure I had heaps of glue on there. And there it is, and you can see the greeblies sticking out. Really happy with the way this has come together. It's such a simple kit. There's a very minimal amount of parts on there. I also added some greeblies to his arm because I'm going to have that ripped off in the diorama. Off camera, I gave it a base coat of German red-brown from Vallejo. And then I'm going to give it a bit of a mottled coat with this rust. Now I'm just doing this fairly unevenly, just to give it a bit of interest with the tones. And the same thing with this light rust, just giving it another shade. So I end up with 3 different shades of rusting. And that's the final look. Now before I do any base colour on there, I'm using some of this hairspray, and I decanted that into one of these little bottles, and then that goes straight into my airbrush. Well, not the whole bottle, just the hairspray. Now I'm giving it a nice liberal coat on some of the areas that I wanted to chip, because that's the hairspray method for chipping paint. Now my base colour is this olive drab. To get the chipping you desire, all you need to do is use a wet brush and hit the areas that you want to chip. Now the more water you put on there, the greater your chips are going to be. And it's just a matter of using this toothpick, going around and slowly chipping it away. And as you can see, it not only looks great, but it's really easy to do. What a great looking contrast that is. GOK's claw was painted flat black and then dry brushed with a bit of gunmetal. We need to add a bit more weathering now, so I'm using some of this dark rust from Vallejo. And off camera I did give GOK a bit of a coat of flat clear to protect the paint. And just a really thin wash over the complete body. And then damped up most of it with this makeup sponge. And to add some more rust streaks, some of this rust from Vallejo. To help the wash run really smoothly, I did give him a bit of a spritz of water. After this wash has dried, I still need to add a bit of rust texture, so I'm using some of this pigment and a sepia shade, both from Vallejo, and just dabbing it with this piece of sponge. I like to mix it so it's kind of like a toothpaste consistency. And when this stuff dries, it looks really, really good. It comes up a flat and textured and sort of a flaky finish to it. It's a great looking rust. To pop out more of that detail, I use some of this panel line accent colour, black, from Tamiya. Now you hit all the recessed areas with it and it really pops out the depth. Really adds more 3D to the actual model kit. And once that was all done, I put that aside and it was onto the base. This is a block of XPS foam and I just used a hot wire to cut it. It's really easy to use. I love using this stuff. Great for terrain work. I try and use as much as I possibly can. This was the bit that I cut off. And now I'm just snapping it to create my little cliff area. I've tried different types of adhesives to glue these parts together. And a bit of a sad case for me because it's either melted it or not worked at all. So I've kind of had to resort to PVA glue. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. Quick composition check with my GOK. It's looking good, coming together nicely. Now off camera, I've given the whole base a couple coats of PVA glue. And this is a really thin mixture of plaster of Paris. I'm making sure I get into all the nooks and crannies. Because I've decided I'm going to use a bit of resin in this diorama. And the last time I used resin, it was a disaster. So I'm a bit scared, a bit cautious, a bit paranoid about using it again. Now once the black undercoat is all finished, I decided I need to add a bit of shading to it. And the best way to do that was just to add a bit of grey sprayed directly down. It's a really quick and easy way creating some awesome shadows. I gave the whole base a nice coat of this wash, and it's just acrylic green paint. And I've got a bit of brown in there as well, so I'll give it a nice mottled finish to it. And you can see it's quite heavily thinned down. Then again, with the makeup brush, I dabbed up most of the paint. I'm loving the tones, it's looking really good. We still need to pop out some more of that detail, so I'm using some of this medium green from Ammo. And we lightly dry brush the raised areas. It's coming up so well, loving the detail in this. Time to add a bit of vegetation back onto the PVA glue and some 2mm static grass with this static grass applicator. And at 1 to 144th scale, I can actually use some of this foam to create my little bushes, my little hedges. And this is some PVA glue that's been watered down with water with a couple of drops of dishwashing liquid to break the tension so it actually soaks in nicely. Some more wash. Just hitting the edges of the rocks with this. And then this streak in grime from Vallejo, I'm creating some streaks. If you haven't already, I would love you to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'd love it if you shared the video. It'd be much appreciated. I don't normally work in such a small scale, so it's a bit of a learning curve for me in this particular project. A bit of hot stick on his bottom to hold him into place. Make sure it doesn't go anywhere from the diorama. With GOK committed in his position, I think it's time to add a bit more weathering, just some final streaks for him. And I'm just using some of these pencils from AK. These are weathering pencils and I'm using the vivid orange for this. Now the way I use them is I get a little bit of water, dab it onto the tip of the pencil and then paint the streaks on. I just find this way it's a lot easier to use and I get better control than actually using the pencil as a pencil. Even though he's looking really, really good, it's right about here I decided he needs to be integrated into surrounds a bit more. To do that, I use some of this fine turf and just sprinkle it on top of the GOK. And this is basically to show vines are growing over him and moss and that type of thing. It's also to show that a bit of time has passed since he got knocked out. Here I'm just doing a bit of a dry brush on those areas with some yellow. And it's right about here, while I was doing this section, I kind of thought, you know what, it really needs something else. The composition, I think, needs a tree. So it was off onto my tree assembly bit. Now I'm just using some tree roots here, and a bit of super glue to assemble the base of the tree, or the basic shape. It currently looks a bit bare, but that's easily solved. Off camera, I gave the roots a bit of a spray with some spray adhesive, and just using some of that foam that I used earlier for the little bushes, I then sprinkled it onto the adhesive. I did about 3 coats, and then another coat of the spray adhesive, and this is that fine turf. Once I glued the tree into place, I then shaped it just to make it a bit more attractive. Back onto those tree roots again, and I'm using that as debris at the bottom of the lake. Even though the water will be quite murky, you still need to have some detail so you can see through that murkiness. After this step, I left it overnight to dry. To add a bit more depth to the tree, I'm just hitting it with some light green onto the top ends of those leaves. With all the gluing, sanding and painting bits just about done, it's onto the scariest part of the whole build. I'm about to pour some resin, and I'm terrified. So here we go. I learned a lot from my last disaster that I had. So I'm using some 1.5mm acrylic sheets here with some silicone, and I'm creating a little box. Last time I used some gaffer tape and hot stick glue, and it just didn't hold, and it leaked everywhere, so I'm over-engineering it this time. So while I'll leave that overnight to dry, I'll paint these figures. Now 1 to 144th scale, the figures are only 12mm high, so not a great amount of detail, so pretty much I'm painting block colours. Just using a variety of different colours, just mixing it up. You can see the little palette of colours I have on the piece of paper there. Once those figures are dried, giving them all a bit of a wash of some dark grey, just so they don't look so cartoony. Okay, here we are the next day. I'm using some of this 2-to-1 ratio resin. And it's 2-part resin, 1 part hardener. And to give it a bit of colour, I'm using some of this dark green ink. To make sure I get the right ratios, I'm just using some kitchen scales for this. I only need about 300 millilitres of resin for my project. So I start off with 200 millilitres of the resin, and then pour in 100 millilitres of the hardener. And give it a bit of a stir for about 3-4 minutes. Not worry about bubbles because they'll actually be removed a bit later on. I ended up using about 4 drops to get the right consistency that I needed for the murkiness. I do recommend use a clear cup for the mixing process. You can then see exactly what the murkiness consistency will be like. A trick to get rid of most of the bubbles is to run it down a stick. This one little trick removes so much of the bubbles. During this process, I was extremely careful to make sure I didn't get any resin onto the little robot. That would be a problem for me. And I filled it up just to the edge of the grass area. I then returned about every 10 or 15 minutes just to get rid of some of these bubbles that would start coming to the surface. And I just used this little torch that I had from my barbecue. After about an hour, when the resin was starting to thicken, I think I got a bit carried away with the areas between his legs. With my enthusiasm to pop puddles, I overheated that area and it solidified a lot quicker than the rest of it. And it reacted pretty badly. It gave me all these extra bubbles and it warped a bit. Oh, it was a bit of a disaster. Minor disaster, I guess, really, compared to everything else. But usable, still usable. It actually kind of looked interesting apart from that one big bubble. And it also ran up the grassy areas. Don't know why it did that, but it did. My grass ended up being really hard. Good news, it's an easy fix. No problem, I could get to it, probably had about an hour's worth of work, but it is fixable, which is good. Now it was time to pull my little box apart, and I may have spoken a little bit too early. I may have used the wrong type of silicone beading, because when I ripped off the sides, it actually ripped out a chunk of my XPS foam. Again, it's an easy fix, but it will be time wasted on repairs. And if you're a resin expert, please let me know in the comments what silicone I should be using. Okay, so it took a little bit longer than an hour to fix. After those fixes, you couldn't even tell I had a minor disaster on my hands. I shouldn't really complain because after my first resin pour, that was an absolute disaster and I couldn't use anything from it. This is actually coming up pretty good. I'm using some of this impasto gel from Atelier to create some of the rippling effect on top of the little lake of mine. And when this stuff dries, it dries clear, so I get this really nice rippling effect. It definitely looks quite terrible at the moment, that's for sure. Yuck. Looks like snow. And finally, let's super glue some of these figures into place. And we're just about there, so you know what? I think you peeps have been such great viewers that I think you deserve to see the hero shot coming up right now.